Chapter 1101, Special Reward. Catalea also didn't return to her senses for a few seconds. She never expected Emperor Rosel's secret mausoleum to involve the abyss. However, after some careful thought, she realized that it wasn't surprising that a conflict at that level would involve something like that. For a moment, she hoped that the queen wouldn't pursue this matter, but in the end, she suppressed this thought to the bottom of her heart. She felt that if it were her, then she would also make the same choice. All sorts of thoughts flashed through her mind as she bowed towards the end of the long, mottled table.
Thank you for your answer. I have no further questions today.
The fool nodded slightly and surveyed the area.
You may begin.
Just as he finished speaking, Fors, who had been mustering her courage all this while, said as she closed her eyes as though she had resolved herself to charge towards death.
Mr. World, I have a commission for you.
Seeing the World Gairman Sparrow look over, she hurriedly explained,
You don't have to do much. You'll just leave me at an unfamiliar place every once in a while, and you can pick me up after a few days. If you're really busy, you can present traveling to me several times at a particular point in time for me to record.
Upon hearing Miss Magician's words, the first thought that came to Klein's mind was man versus wild.
I have too many suitable places, such as the battlefield of the gods on the easternmost front of the Sonia Sea, Calderon City in the spirit world, the City of Miracles Liveside in Grosel's travels. They're 10 times, 100 times, or even 1,000 times more dangerous than the wilderness. I'm just afraid that Miss Magician won't be able to handle the danger.
Klein didn't let the World Gairman Sparrow immediately answer. He controlled the fake person and cast its gaze on Miss Magician with a pressuring look. Fors silently took a deep breath, calmed her emotions, and added in more detail.
This is the thing. I'm a Sequence 6 Scribe of the Apprentice pathway now. In order to digest the potion, aside from recording all kinds of Beyonder powers, I still need to record down the local customs and traditions of different places. I hope that I can become a traveler as soon as possible. Only then can I avoid most of the dangers during the war. Mr. World, I've only recorded traveling once, so I won't be able to return if I go somewhere else. I can only ask for your help. I wonder if you're interested and what kind of payment you'd wish to receive.
So that's how it is. Justice Audrey finally came to a realization. Furthermore, she felt that Fors's method was really great, especially since she's a best-selling novel author. Her act of recording scenery and customs and publishing it as a book should be able to greatly aid in her potion digestion rate. Audrey nodded silently as she felt sincerely happy for her friend. However, as a senior spectator, how could she not sense Fors's horror and fear towards Mr. World? She was looking forward to knowing what would happen when the two of them formally interacted.
Audrey, this state of mind isn't good. However, this is the attitude of a spectator. Fors definitely wouldn't expect that the so-called crazy adventurer she fears is only a mask. Beneath it is a gentle and kind heart. I also have to work hard to digest the Dreamwalker potion. I should visit the dreams surrounding me every night.
Audrey didn't show any changes in her expression or gaze as she maintained the attitude of a spectator. After the hanged man Alger heard the magician's words, he sighed. This was because even this apprentice was beginning to break through to Sequence 5 while he was still stuck at that level.
The World and the Hermit are already at Sequence 4. Justice, the Sun, the Moon, and the Star are also all at Sequence 5. Apart from the Magician, the newly joined Judgment is lower than my sequence.
As his thoughts churned, Algier felt that stifled, a heavy feeling that was difficult to resolve. He wished he could immediately find an opportunity to make contributions and become a demigod, a cataclysmic interrer. He yearned to have a high position and be in a position of power. He wanted others to acknowledge and respect him and be submissive to him. He didn't wish to fall behind in the Tarot Club.
Is that so?
At the same time that Klein understood what Miss Magician was thinking, he suddenly recalled something. It was the identity that the other party had mentioned in front of Mr. Fool during a particular full moon.
An ex-surgeon who was now a novelist. Will spreading the terrifying legends that I create into text form help me digest the Bizarro Sorcerer potion further? The more shocking, harrowing, terrifying, and incomprehensible the description in the novel is, the better the effects.
Klein suddenly had inspiration and controlled the world Gehrman Sparrow to say,
This commission is very simple, but the payment I need is very special.
Upon hearing that Mr. World was inclined to agree, Fors asked in both joy and anxiousness.
What's the payment?
The world Gehrman Sparrow pondered for a moment and said,
Collect information about the ghost stories that have happened recently in the various major hospitals in Backland and write them into a small publication or have them published in the newspapers. The requirement for the novel is that it's even more terrifying and bizarre. It's best if it can be a best-selling novel.
The reason why he only mentioned the matters of the major hospitals in Backland was because Miss Magician was a local author who was part of medical circles. Being able to come to know of the urban myths and use that as material for a novel was very reasonable, and it wouldn't incur suspicion. However, if she had even learned of the urban myths in the Rorstad Archipelago, Fog Sea, and East and West Balaam, then Zaratul's marionette would definitely visit her. The ghost tales of the various hospitals in Backland. After hearing the world Gehrman Sparrow's words, Audrey was stunned for nearly 3 seconds. She had originally thought that those rumors were caused by the church's beyonders, secretly treating the injured victims. Mushroom and weeds were the negative effects of the mystical items, but she never expected it to be something else. Audrey had also guessed if it was done by Dwayne Dantes. After all, this gentleman had heard from her about the victims of the air raid. Furthermore, he was a very kind gentleman. However, due to the lack of clues and evidence, she could only believe that it was more likely to be related to the church. At this moment, she was almost certain that the clown angel was Mr. World Gehrman Sparrow. Even if it wasn't, they definitely had a deep connection.
A Mr. World who wears a mushroom and weed mask is the same as the Gehrman Sparrow who wears a crazy adventurer mask. Why does he act like that when he's doing something good? Is it because he needs the feeling or corresponding feedback from creating fear?
Audrey thought to herself with some guesses. As for the star Leonard and the hanged man Alger, one immediately thought of the strange urban myths that the Nighthawks who belonged to St. Samuel Cathedral were discussing recently, while the other fell deep into thought about the horror stories his subordinates had heard or encountered.
I've never really heard of such payment before. It's not like I'm writing a biography. Although there has been a recent war, the sales of newspapers and novels seem to have increased. My previous editor has been urging me to write a new book. Yes, I must keep my identity a secret. I have to convince my editor to change my pen name. The excuse is that novels of different styles should use different pen names.
Fors didn't think too much about it. After a slight period of deliberation, she agreed.
All right, no problem.
The world Gehrman Sparrow chuckled and hoarsely said,
If you do well, I'll give you the opportunity to record the beyonder powers of a demigod.
No problem.
Fors swept away her usual languidness and firmly replied. To her, recording a demigod's powers not only increased her ability to protect herself, but it could also effectively help her digest the potion. This also made Audrey, Shio, Leonard, and the other members sigh in their hearts. Scribes were truly enviable. Once a demigod-level expert became a backer, a scribe wielded extremely powerful strength. They wouldn't be weaker than a sequence 5, or may even be stronger than 1 at times. After coming to an agreement, the scene fell silent for a moment. This was because the other members of the Tarot Club currently didn't have any requirements. Leonard had become a spirit warlock recently, and he had yet to conclude the acting principles. There was still the possibility of him advancing from within the Church of Evernight. As for mystical items, he had already bought the Word of the Sea. If there were any special circumstances, he could request to use sealed artifacts of the Church. Emlyn was reading the Sanguine's research information regarding the Moon Domain every day, hoping to make a Scarlet Scholar more practical. As for the Sequence 4 Shaman King's potion formula and Beyonder ingredients, he didn't need them for an extensive period of time, nor could he afford them. Derek had recently mastered the powers of Priest of Light, and he was still very far from advancing. As for the unshadowed main ingredient, he had already obtained it. Similarly, Audrey and Gio had also recently advanced. One of them was working hard to help Mr. World, accumulating contribution points, while the other was burdened with a huge debt and was eager to repay it. Alger was in the Church of the Lord of Storms, so he had to keep a secret. He was currently in an awkward position which required him to find a chance to advance. Furthermore, he had obtained the cataclysmic Interrer's potion formula from the world. Catalea had just become a demigod. She was currently deep in research on all kinds of secrets and all sorts of mysticism knowledge. She was pleasantly surprised that, despite having recently advanced, just recalling the knowledge and secrets she knew from the past had allowed her to directly digest quite a bit of the potion. Amongst them, the various things she had heard from the Tarot Club had contributed greatly. The transaction segment quickly ended as the members began their free exchange. Emlyn surveyed the area, and his gaze landed on Leonard's face.
If you're an official Beyonder, how will you deal with a clergyman of an opposing faction in your area of jurisdiction? He hasn't done anything wrong, nor does he plan on doing anything wrong.
Although Fainapotter had yet to start a war with Lowen, they had invaded Lowen's ally, Lenberg. This made the believers and citizens living around the Harvest Church look at Bishop Utrovsky in an increasingly odd manner. Leonard thought carefully and said,
Protective custody.
Chapter 1102, Engaging Tigers to Hunt Wolves.
Protective custody. That's quite a witty answer, as expected of a newly promoted Red Gloves team captain.
When the fool Klein heard the Star Leonard's answer, he couldn't help but laugh inwardly. He knew very well who Emlyn was referring to, and he knew quite a bit about Bishop Utrovsky, who wished to be called a priest. He didn't really believe Emlyn White's claim that he hasn't done anything wrong, nor does he plan on doing anything wrong. This was because, to a deity's blessed or a zealot, their understanding of something wrong might be different from a normal person's. Of course, Klein never suspected Father Utrovsky's claim that life was precious, and his piousness and acknowledgement of a joyous harvest. But the problem was that the Church of Earth Mother also preached that lives were like plants, which would ultimately wither and die, returning to the embrace of the Earth Mother. They would then grow again when the next year came. A qualified bishop of the Church of Earth Mother wouldn't treat death in the same manner as the most ordinary of people.
Regardless, Father Utrovsky has to be controlled. This is both a form of protection for the Earth Mother's believers, as well as the citizens around him. It's also a form of protection for this half-giant bishop, in case some irredeemable situation occurs.
While Klein was thinking to himself, Leonard, who had no lack of understanding of the Harvest Church, also understood the meat of Emlyn's question. He planned on leading his team members to confirm the situation in the next 2 days, taking the Earth Mother's blessed into protective custody with the help of the official organizations that were in charge of the area south of the bridge. And when Emlyn heard the answer, he slowly nodded without saying a word. Seeing that he was silent, Leonard turned to ask a question he wanted to get some feedback on.
Are there any major matters lurking beneath Backlund recently?
What he really wanted to ask was why his Red Gloves team had been left behind in the capital of capitals as a part of the reserve forces. As soon as he finished speaking, the other members of the Tarot Club, including the son Derek, who wasn't too concerned about matters of the outside world, all cast their gazes at the world Gehrman Sparrow. From what they knew, whenever something happened in Backlund, Mr. World would more or less give a warning.
What major matters has been lurking beneath Backlund recently? There's plenty. The Black Emperor ritual of George III, my secret alliance with Queen Mystic. The three churches may seem to be tacitly in approval, but all have different attitudes.
As Klein's thoughts raced, he suddenly understood what Leonard wanted to ask. After all, they would occasionally communicate privately.
That's right. Why was Leonard left in Backlund? Because of me, the church doesn't want to put Leonard in a dangerous situation? Am I thinking too highly of myself?
Klein secretly shook his head and rejected the thought that first came to him. He quickly changed his train of thought and analyzed the problem on matters that Leonard could be of service.
Leonard is only a Sequence 5, so what use can he play in Backlund that has deep undercurrents? Even if he's of use, they wouldn't use him. Instead, they would make use of me, who's related to him, or Pelez Zoroast. This can rule me out. I'm still a qualified blessed at the moment. If I really needed to do anything, then a simple instruction would suffice. The clearing of the Amon avatars in Backlund last time made the goddess, or the upper echelons of the church, guess that Pelez Zoroast is hiding in the vicinity of Backlund Street, and they ended up suspecting Leonard. There's a possibility, and it's not a low one either. Back then I was concerned to some extent. I only believed that, in the case of Aemon becoming a god, the church and Pelez Zoroast were on the same page, that they could form some sort of tacit understanding. In fact, I believe that grandpa had such considerations when he first chose Leonard as a target for parasitizing. But why is Pelez Zoroast being kept in Backlund? To fish for Aemon? Even among the kings of angels, Aemon ranks among the top. It's almost impossible for the goddess to engage in a divine descent. With the church's angels, Grade 0 sealed artifacts, and Pelez Zoroast, it shouldn't be difficult to expel Amon, but it's almost impossible to kill him, unless he doesn't come with his actual body. But in that case, it's not worth making such arrangements.
Klein's thoughts quickly developed, and soon he had a new idea.
Fishing for Aemon isn't done so as to deal with him. Instead, it's to hold back Zaratul, who's currently in Backlund. Similar pathways could be interchanged at high levels. Even if one became a true god at Sequence 0, they still have a strong desire for the uniqueness and Sequence 1 beyonder characteristics of neighboring pathways. On this point, the Evernight Goddess's plan was excellent evidence. The goddess wants to make Backlund into a potpourri mess before wiping them all out.
Klein made the world Gehrman Sparrow hesitate for a few seconds before saying,
The leader of the Secret Order, a Sequence 1 angel, and an old friend of Emperor Roselle, Zaratul, is currently hiding in Backlund.
Seeing that the members of the Tarot Club were clearly a little confused and perplexed, the world added in a hoarse voice,
The law of beyonder characteristics conservation we often refers to the conservation of beyonder characteristics of neighboring pathways. In other words, similar pathways also obey the law of convergence of beyonder characteristics.
Leonard immediately fell into deep thought. After a few seconds, he deliberated and asked,
The Marauders and the Seer pathways are neighboring pathways?
Yes, the Apprentice pathway is also a neighboring pathway.
The world answered frankly. Upon hearing their conversation, Fors first connected the law of convergence of beyonder characteristics to the attraction between beyonder characteristics taught to her by her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham. She connected it to the Saint of Secrets who had been attracted. Then she began to consider a question.
If it really is, as Mr. World said, that beyonder characteristics of neighboring pathways attract one another, then would it have attracted the attention of Zaratul back then? After all, he is in Backlund.
All of a sudden, Fors thought of the raven that was staring at Bodis's back.
Ah.
Fors hurriedly raised her hand, indicating that she had something to say. Seeing all the members looking over, she hurriedly said,
My teacher is a member of the Abraham family. He wields a rather important sealed artifact.
As the first part of the sentence was known by the other members, other than the star, Fors had no intention of hiding anything. As for the second half of the sentence, she had made some modifications. It was very important to change the phrase to rather important. Seeing that no one was raising any questions, Fors continued.
This causes him to occasionally encounter high-sequence beyonders of the Apprentice pathway. Previously, when he came to Backlund, the Aurora Order's Saint of Secrets, Botis, had appeared nearby. As for me, I noticed that a raven was looking in the direction where Botis was heading.
A raven?
The details of the foggy town surfaced in Klein's mind. At the top of the pitch-black cathedral, there were ravens flying around, as if they were holding a memorial or in grief. As for Zaratul's avatar, it was hidden inside the cathedral.
Zaratul is used to using ravens as marionettes? Is this a mark left behind during his phase as a bizarro sorcerer?
While in thought, Klein made the world speak.
That might very well be Zaratul.
I actually met a Sequence 1 angel.
Fors felt a sense of fear and horror. She then recalled how she and Shio had discussed Adam and thus ended up possibly targeted. For some reason, she had the illusion that she had become the protagonist of a novel. Despite being only a sequence 7 or 6, she had established connections with the Kings of Angels and sequence 1 angels. With this in mind, Force hurriedly turned her head to Miss Justice and said,
Can you hypnotize me later into forgetting certain matters? I'm afraid that I might accidentally recall something and attract attention.
No problem.
As Audrey answered, she glanced at Theo and nodded at her. As for the star Leonard, he had some ideas as well. He planned on discussing it with Old Man when he returned to hear his opinion. Klein didn't continue talking about the major matters that lurked beneath Backlund. This was because they were just too high-end for the other members of the Tarot Club. Not only were they unable to participate in it directly, but even having a complete understanding of them could bring about a disaster upon themselves. In this aspect, Klein's idea was that he could get the help of the members of the Tarot Club in certain segments, but it was like commissioning a bounty hunter to do something, without getting them too involved in the matter and figuring out the reason for the commission. It was a form of protection for them. At this moment, Alger looked around and said,
According to my observations, the Church of Storms isn't too enthusiastic about this war.
They aren't too enthusiastic? This doesn't match the image of the Church of the Lord of Storms. Although their teachings don't advocate combat and don't promote war, they definitely emphasize the need to treat their enemies like a storm and vent whatever anger they have on the spot.
When Klein heard this, he felt a little surprised. He then combined his understanding of the deities and began his preliminary analysis.
According to my previous speculations, Storm, Sun, Reader, Spectator, and Shepherd can switch paths at high levels. There should be an immense conflict between them. As for the Lord of Storms, he is highly likely the wind angel of yesteryear. He had eaten Adam's father, the ancient sun god, the city of silver creator. Even if he had tacitly allowed George III to become Black Emperor, it's impossible for him to sit back and watch Adam make use of the flood of the times to ascend to divinity. Therefore, the Church of the Lord of Storms is unwilling to have the war increase in scope and allow it to turn into a world war. Hence, he is trying hard to control his impulse. It must be really hard on them. This can explain why Lowen and Intis would maintain their strange silence when Fainapotter invaded Lenberg, Mason, and Segar. The Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun and the Church of the Lord of Storms are probably in a difficult position. They're unable to make up their minds. On the one hand, at the level of the deities, it isn't that there is no possibility of abandoning their alliance to deal with the Church of Knowledge. On the other hand, the battle strategies at the national level also prompts them to protect those countries. Forcefully breaking the perceptions built up by the citizens of a country would be an act that causes the anchors to become unstable. Also, once they participate in the battle, they would help Adam fulfill the conditions of his advancement to Sequence 0.
Klein deliberately made the world silent for a moment before replying to the Hanged Man's intelligence.
At present, this is inevitable.
Chapter 1103, Hint. Klein did not actually remember if he had told the Hanged Man and the others that the Sailor, Spectator, Sun, Reader, and Secret Suppliant pathways were interchangeable, unless he used dream divination to recall it. However, since the Hanged Man had expressed his doubts towards the Church of the Lord of Storms, it meant that he had not thought about the interchangeability of both paths. Regardless of whether he knew it or not, or if he had yet to connect the two matters together, Klein believed that there was a need for him to explain things clearly. This allowed the members of the Tarot Club to grasp the true stances of the various major factions, thus letting them avoid many dangers. After the Hanged Man, Alger, and the others cast their gazes at him, he controlled the World Gehrman Sparrow and made him say in a low, uncertain tone,
The Storm, Sun, Spectator, Reader, and Secret Suppliant pathways are neighboring pathways. Likewise for Evernight, god of combat, and death. And neighboring pathways often become enemies. Of course, that is not absolute. At least the 7 deities have established an alliance.
Upon hearing the world's reply, Alger first recalled Adam pushing for the flood of the times to become a god. Following that, thoughts flashed through his mind, as he gained a certain level of understanding of the Church of the Lord of Storms' current attitude. This made him feel a rather special sense of superiority and joy. It was as if he had seen the essence of the matter exceeding the level of most beyonders in the Church of the Lord of Storms. Similarly, Audrey had a brand new understanding of Intis's strange silence in this war. She was even more worried about the situation in Lenberg, Mason, and Seagar. In addition, she also knew that she could switch to Unshadowed, Cataclysmic Interror, and to the corresponding Sequence 4 demigod of the Church of Knowledge and Wisdom she had recently met. As for the corresponding Sequence 4 of the Secret Suppliant pathway, it was not within her considerations at all. Of course, compared to other pathways, she still preferred Manipulator. She liked the Spectator pathway from the bottom of her heart. However, she also felt deep fear towards the upper echelons of the Spectator pathway. Finn Rambus had left a rather bad impression on her. Adams' any mention of it will be known had left her with a trauma. She had no choice but to undergo self-evaluations and treat the corresponding problems from time to time. The hermit Cattleya had always been deeply knowledgeable about such matters. Apart from the information mentioned by the World Gehrman Sparrow, she also knew that the Mystery, Prior, and Savant pathways were neighboring pathways that could be interchanged at high sequences. It was likewise for the Arbiter and Lawyer pathways, the Prisoner and Criminal pathways, the Hunter and Assassin pathway, and the Planter and Apothecary pathway. As the other members of the Tarot Club dispersed their thoughts, Alger said to the World Gehrman Sparrow,
Thank you for your answer.
He did not say exactly what insights he had gleaned from the answer. In fact, for an instant, Alger wanted to leave the Church of the Lord of Storms and switch to another pathway. This was better than waiting for a very slim chance in the Church. However, he ultimately gave up on this idea. After all, his goal for a long time was to become a cardinal of the Church of the Lord of Storms. At present, he was beginning to yearn to be ranked first amongst the cardinal ranks, becoming an angel in charge of the mandated punishers, or ascetics. As for the position of pontiff, Alger did not yearn for it. This was because it was too close to the Lord of Storms, and he had many secrets he kept close to his chest. If he were to be chosen as pontiff, Alger suspected that he would be smote to ashes by a lightning storm that descended from the sky the moment he put on the papal tiara. Seeing that the exchange between the world and the hanged man had ended, Emlyn asked with curiosity,
Which pathway can the apothecary pathway be interchanged with?
Being from the Sanguine race made them have no thoughts of switching to other pathways, as it would often mean that they had lost their identify. Therefore, Emlyn was not too concerned about such matters.
The Planter pathway of the Church of Earth Mother.
Cattleya answered casually.
The Planter pathway, possessed by the Church of Earth Mother.
Emlyn frowned as he vaguely grasped something. At this moment, Gio also asked,
Which pathway neighbors the Arbiter pathway?
Lawyer.
Cattleya answered simply.
Lawyer of the Black Emperor pathway. In other words, if I could become a Sequence 5, I would be able to switch to Sequence 4 of the Black Emperor pathway. And Fours had previously told me that Mr. Fool has the card of blasphemy. It contains all the secrets of the Black Emperor pathway.
Zio suddenly realized that there was a glimmer of light for her future. It had to be known that the Arbiter pathway was firmly controlled by the two royal families. Even the corresponding military only had the potion formula for the low and mid sequences. If they wanted to advance beyond Sequence 5, they had to receive a bestowment from the royal family, just like how every general had to be conferred by the king or queen. Furthermore, what they obtained in the end was the concocted potion and the ritual. To Gio, this meant that it was almost impossible for her to get the Sequence 4 potion formula for the Arbiter pathway. Of course, no matter how tightly guarded the potion formulas was, there were bound to be loopholes. The military's demigods knew of the ritual, and from time to time they would cooperate with the royal family to hunt powerful supernatural beings. They could roughly narrow down the candidates for the main ingredient to a small area, but this also meant that they could only confirm the formula through repeated experiments. At the same time, the military demigods were also unable to grasp the supplementary ingredients. If they wanted to rely only on the main ingredients to advance, they needed to seek out the benediction of fate. And now, Shio had seen another possibility. At this moment, Audrey had already summarized the neighboring pathways that Mr. World and Ma'am Hermit had mentioned before, thoughtfully asking.
Among prisoner, criminal, hunter, assassin, savant, mystery prior, and monster, which ones are neighboring similar pathways?
The World Gairman Sparrow glanced at the hermit and replied hoarsely.
Prisoner and criminal, hunter and assassin, and savant and mystery prior are similar pathways that can be interchanged at high sequences.
This was knowledge that could be confirmed by Klein. Among them, the interchangeability between prisoner and criminal was something mentioned by the Red Angel Evil Spirit, to which Miss Sharon tacitly accepted. The interchangeability between savant and mystery prior had been personally demonstrated by Emperor Roselle. As for hunter and assassin, it was information that he had accumulated over time which could finally be confirmed. Fours, who was listening, could not help but ask,
What about monster? There is only this one left.
Seeing the world remain silent, Catalea thought for a moment before saying,
It is difficult to be categorized as a neighbor of any other beyonder pathway. Just like fate, it can only objectively exist alone. I can be sure of that. I can only say that the most fundamental order in our world's supernatural powers might be chaos and disharmony.
The reason why Catalea was certain that the monster pathway did not have the means to be interchanged with other pathways was because her advancement ritual required her to analyze the Snake of Fate's blood.
I see.
Audrey was slightly uncomfortable with this disharmonious situation, but she quickly adjusted her state of mind. After the exchange was almost complete, all the members of the Tarot Club looked at the Sun Derrick. The youth said without any hesitation,
We have already set off. We are currently less than a day away from Afternoon Town. When we arrive, we will be resting for another day or two before we begin exploring the Giant King's court.
The Sun's words made Alger, Catalea, and company suddenly feel like myths were entering reality. Compared to places like the ruins of the battlefield of the gods, the Giant King's court was a symbolic entity that appeared in various legends and in different secret documents. What secret was it hiding? What was buried in it? The answer was about to be revealed. Even though they had followed the World Gairman Sparrow into the City of Miracles Livseed, which was on par with the Giant King's court, the Star Leonard and Justice Audrey were also secretly excited and looking forward to hearing more. After all, the city that the Dragon King had imagined into existence had lost too much in the process of being transferred to Grozel's travels. There were no traces of anything of value. Apart from the building itself, there was only the hall that expressed the extraordinariness of the ancient myths. Furthermore, what was even more important was that Derek had mentioned that the kings of angels had come to a secret plot in the Giant King's court. As for the fool Klein, he was thinking of something else.
Should I get Little Sun to pray to the Fool before the exploration? Then I will use the Crimson Star and the Sea God Scepter to extend my vision to a certain distance so that I can watch a live broadcast. Yes, in that case, if there are any accidents, I can still provide some help. The only problem is that this method of relying on the prayer points of light for observation cannot last too long. This has nothing to do with my own spirituality. It is just that this connection will fade away with time and last 45 minutes at most. Let Little Sun pray every once in a while. That is under the premise that it does not affect his battle or attract the attention of the people around him. In that case, my spirituality can probably last for 2 hours. It is not on the same level as my sequence 5. It is also because of my recent rapid digestion of the potion.
After pondering for a moment, Klein did not speak. He controlled the World Gairman Sparrow to hint to the Sun.
Before exploring the Giant King's court, you can pray to Mr. Fool and pray for good luck. In the process, you can also pray many times.
Mr. World really is a nice guy.
After Derek sincerely thanked him, he hurriedly turned his body towards the end of the long, mottled table. Then he saw Mr. Fool, who was enveloped by the grayish-white fog, nod slightly. Chapter 1104, Contradiction. The world above the gray fog had been restored to its state of silence, as though the gathering that had just ended was an illusion. Klein bent his finger and lightly knocked on the edge of the long, mottled table. He made the pages of the Roselle diary which Cattleya had just given appear once again. Amidst an indescribable stillness, Klein cast his gaze towards the first paragraph of the first page with a solemn expression. On 27th September, I saw Miss Ithaca once again. I had a nerve-wracking and thrilling but sufficiently wonderful experience with her. As expected, I prefer women of this age. I'm not just reminiscing about my youth, but rather that I haven't changed after so many years. Heh, I'm really dedicated.
I read your diary with such seriousness, and you're giving me this.
The corners of Klein's mouth twitched as he lampooned at the emperor who he had only seen a portrait of. He immediately gathered his thoughts and shifted his gaze. In a lounge at the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral, after Leonard Mitchell opened his eyes, he deliberated for a moment and said in a low voice,
Old man, the secret order's Zaratul seems to be in Backlund.
In his mind, the slightly aged voice quickly sounded.
Indeed.
Upon hearing this, Leonard immediately asked,
Old man, are you familiar with that Zaratul? Didn't you say that the Zoroast family and the Zaratul family are both important nobles of the Solomon Empire?
From his point of view, as ex-colleagues and former comrades in arms, how could old man not be familiar with Zaratul? Palez Zoroast scoffed.
I'm familiar with the Zaratul, who died in the War of the Four Emperors. The one alive who's now should be his descendant. I might or might not have seen him before. Sai, the Zaratul, back then had already obtained clues regarding the second sequence one beyonder characteristic from the true creator. He was waiting for the War of the Four Emperors to end before searching for it. If he succeeded, he would be considered a king of angels. Unfortunately, in the War of the Four Emperors, he directly encountered the existence from the Antigonus family, who could be known as the half-fool, and Bethel Abraham was also involved. He could appear anywhere, anytime. If he hadn't been quickly banished and sealed by Evernight and Storm, I might not have survived to the end of the War of the Four Emperors either.
The half-fool.
Leonard's eyelids twitched when he heard this title, as he thought of the entity above the gray fog for some baffling reason. He then forced himself to control himself and directed his thoughts to something else.
Even from the description of a bystander, Mr. Dorr was clearly one of the top existences among the kings of angels. It required two true deities to join forces to banish and seal him. There's a high chance that he was especially good at escaping, making it very difficult to kill. And back then, the battle situation was tense, so it was imperative to eliminate an enemy that posed a threat as soon as possible. Old man is reminiscing about the past, so he's feeling a little uneasy. He actually said so much in one breath.
Amidst his thoughts, Leonard suddenly said,
I was left in Backlund because they wished to use you to attract Aemon here?
The wistful feelings in Palez Zoroast's tone vanished as he clicked his tongue.
Who made this guess? I don't think it's you. However, it's not bad that you know how to use your own resources to probe for the truth.
This is something I've been very familiar with ever since I joined the Nighthawks.
Leonard replied inwardly but didn't say a word. Palez Zoroast continued.
I guess that too. To be honest, your ex-colleague's relationship with Evernight really confuses me. If it wasn't for how familiar the concealment forces that appeared that day was, I wouldn't have dared to make such a guess. With Zaratul and I in Backlund, Amon will arrive soon too. It truly is a perfect triangle of balance.
What do you mean? The concealment forces used to deal with Aemon came from the Evernight domain, not Mr. Fool. Does this point that there is a certain level of cooperation between Mr. Fool and the goddess? Or is it that the faith of those higher up in the church actually to Mr. Fool?
Leonard suddenly felt a strong sense of confusion and puzzlement regarding his position in the grand scheme of things. Seeing that Palez was also quite confused, he converged his thoughts and didn't ask any questions regarding this. He frowned and said,
2 Sequence 1 angels and a king of angels. Will this bring about a devastating disaster to Backlund? He remembered that Aemon was a terrifying existence that could kill countless people silently and could even live happily as his victim. Using this as a reference, Zaratul, who was of a neighboring pathway, definitely possessed similarly terrifying powers. If he and Aemon were to clash, half of Backlund or the entirety of Backlund could become the capital of death or the capital of bizarreness.
Pallas Zoroast laughed and said,
Balance also means that everyone will be very restrained. Besides, it's very likely that Aemon won't let his true body enter Backlund. At most, he will send a large number of avatars over. After all, the impossibility of a divine descent by Evernight doesn't mean that Storm or Steam can't.
What do you mean?
Leonard acutely grasped the key point in Old Man's words. Pallas Zoroast's tone suddenly became more relaxed.
Regardless of whether it's because of the war or for other reasons, Evernight is likely unable to interfere with the matters on the ground at the moment. Otherwise, why would she need to lure Amon over to form a balance? She directly set up a trap. And who knows, she might be able to capture Zaratul or scare the cowardly seer away.
Did something happen to the goddesses?
Leonard suddenly turned nervous. The slightly aged voice replied,
It might not be a bad thing, and it might be a good thing.
Without waiting for Leonard to ask further, Pallas Zoroast sighed again.
Amon was attracted to Backlund by me. What about Zaratul? What about me?
I think Zaratul is also here because of you, and you're in Backlund because of me.
Leonard pondered as he replied,
Hey, why do you think you're in Backlund?
Pallas immediately scoffed. Leonard immediately replied,
This is the arrangement of the church. It can't be the effect of the law of convergence of beyonder characteristics, right?
That's not necessarily true.
Pallas's tone turned a little stern.
Most of the time, the law of beyonder characteristic convergence will not directly show in places where you can sense it. Most of the time, it will influence fate. Just like when you board a train, you'll suddenly feel that the scenery along the way is beautiful and will get off the train in advance, resulting in you entering the small city. This might be because there are beyonders or mystical items of neighboring pathways around you.
In other words, there are other things in Backlund that attracts you and Zaratul here, and through you, my fate is affected, causing me to be arranged by the church to stay in Backlund most of the time?
Leonard asked in enlightenment, hoping to gain confirmation. Pallas Zoroast slowly sighed and said,
That possibility can't be ruled out.
Above the gray fog, Klein soon flipped to a diary page of value. 21st November. As I had made too many preparations in the early stages, I obtained that chaotic and terrifying Grade 0 sealed artifact even faster than I imagined. And then, after a difficult battle, and with some help, I finally restored it to a pure Sequence 1 Beyonder characteristic. In a few more days, the ritual will be completed. I should be able to advance to Sequence 1 Knowledge Emperor of the Mystery Prior pathway. 26th November. Sunny and breezy. The ritual was very successful. I digested it thoroughly, and my anchors were even more stable. There weren't many difficulties during the entire process. I'm already a Sequence 1 angel, a Knowledge Emperor. Bernadette no longer has to worry about the influence of the hidden sage. She can abide by the words, do as you wish, but do no harm, and continue on this path. At the same time, the level of an angel at Sequence 1 means that I can greatly resist the notice and corruption from the cosmos. I can head to the Crimson Moon and see what's happening there. Regardless of whether Mr. Dorr is lying or not, everything points to the fact that the Crimson Moon is the key to the problem. If I wish to become a true deity, I have to figure out the reason. I'll make preparations for another 3 more days before attempting to land on the moon. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Ha, don't quote me on that. Upon seeing this, Klein recalled the hysterical diary page of Roselle. He began to suspect that it was written after the Emperor's landing on the moon. Putting down the remaining unread diary pages, Klein began to use dream divination to recall the content he had read over the past year. He wanted to use the comparison to find clues to Roselle's abnormal mental state. not long after he saw a few lines of text in his dream. It was the last diary entry that was theoretically written by Roselle. I'm unable to give any actual suggestions because I myself can't see the true faces of the 7 deities or those evil gods. This might be partially related to the second blasphemy slate that the ancient organization hides. Unfortunately, I only have a rough idea of the hidden parts, and I'm unable to verify them. In this diary, the emperor had even solemnly warned his friends to be careful of the moon. The dream suddenly shattered, and Klein snapped awake. There was an obvious look of fear in his eyes. He clearly remembered that, a long time ago, Roselle had confirmed that there was a hidden portion in the second blasphemy slate. 19th July. The night of the blood moon. Mr. Doerr's answer allowed me to confirm one thing. In that ancient secret organization, the second blasphemy slate I saw wasn't complete.
The emperor forgot? No, how could he have forgotten such an important matter? He only appeared a little extreme, and he didn't have much of a problem. Why did this happen?
Klein couldn't help but mutter to himself silently, having an inexplicable and terrifying feeling. The last diary entry, or rather, the Emperor Roselle who wrote that sentence, seemed to be another person. Chapter 1105, the key diary entry. Above the grayish-white that wasn't perturbed at all, Klein silently sat at the end of the long, mottled table, like a stone statue that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Regarding the discovery he had just now, he felt a deep sense of fear from the bottom of his heart. He felt a chill rush out from the back of his head, spreading across his entire body, bringing with it obvious yet real shudders. It was as if he had witnessed a familiar friend become a stranger in a very short span of time. His actions were abnormal, as though he had been replaced by someone else. Of course, there was a clearer and more direct analogy in this aspect. It would be Leonard Mitchell coming to visit and discuss the matter regarding Pallas Zoroast as a monocle is suddenly taken out and then put on.
Could it be that the emperor was unknowingly corrupted after his ascension to the Crimson Moon, and he didn't notice it at all? He usually didn't show any abnormalities. Only through reminiscing about his past, through his diary entries, analyzing his inner voice, and talking to himself, would certain premonitions surface in his mind. Or could it be that this was a form of hypnosis by Adam, but Roselle was at least a sequence one when that happened?
Klein couldn't help but lower his head to inspect himself. He imagined how another version of himself existed in his body without realizing it.
He wasn't sure if this entity could be called a human. This truly is an extreme sense of horror.
Klein slowly took a deep breath and forced himself to focus his attention on the diary pages of Emperor Roselle. Soon he discovered something worth reading.
28th July. I attended that ancient secret organization's gathering once again. From the discussions among the members, I sensed a problem. Is it because I advanced too quickly that I'm relatively inexperienced? There are many things that I have never heard of before. Just like how they mentioned about the corruption from the cosmos and underground. This is the first time I know of their existence. Heh, I wonder how many of them are Hess or Shez. Apart from a minority of the members, most of them don't like others knowing their levels. While others are communicating with each other, I asked old Mr. Hermes with a whisper, hoping to understand more about the corruption that stems from the cosmos and underground. Hermes told me that this isn't something I can come into contact with at my current level. Just learning about it alone will cause me to be corrupted. It's actually that scary? What could it be? I'm even more intrigued. That old mister later told me that the corruption that originates from underground can be ignored because it will fade with time. A long time ago, in the era when the ancient gods were active, powerful creatures had attempted to resolve this problem completely. In the end, it made things worse and caused tremendous losses. Later they gave up on the idea of directly exerting influence, and they switched focus to sealing and guarding it. From that day forth, although accidents happened occasionally, it was stable overall. Today, even if there are no seals or guards, as long as no one comes close and tries to go deeper, there won't be any incidents of corruption. What a surprising situation. It appears it doesn't require the protagonist of this era to resolve this problem. Old Mr. Hermes mentioned the cosmos again, and said that the situation there is more complicated, interesting, and more dangerous than I imagined. He said that even a Sequence 2 angel doesn't have much knowledge of the cosmos, they only have a general understanding of it. They aren't aware that, apart from the dangers, there are too many other things. If it wasn't for the fact that he once knew an existence that was good at wandering the cosmos and learned plenty of matters from that person, he wouldn't be able to tell me all of that. I was very curious, but I didn't hold much hope when I asked about the existence who was adept at wandering the cosmos. Old Mr. Hermes didn't hide the truth. He said that it was Mr. Dorr, Bethel Abraham, Mr. Dorr. I pretended not to know anything and asked about that person's level in a very casual tone. Hermes didn't answer directly. He only said that in the fourth epoch, even angels and demigods would address him by his name in private. Those who could make everyone address them by their titles are in a small minority, of which Mr. Dorr was one of them, aside from Evernight, Storm, Earth, and the other deities. Is that so? Mr. Dorr's level really isn't low.
The corruption that stems from underground will naturally fade with time. Arald said that the gray fog gives it a feeling that resembles that of an object from underground. It hopes that I can explore the underground world after I return to my throne of divinity. As for Luca Brewster, he's certain that the higher the sequence, the greater the danger the underground world will bring.
Klein tapped the edge of the long, mottled table with his fingers. He was increasingly puzzled about what was happening underground. Fortunately, Hermes's description, the state of the abandoned castle, and the attitude of the Evemite goddess seemed to indicate that the corruption that stems from underground would naturally dissipate. Leaving it alone was the best solution.
Phew. Then I shall temporarily put aside my worries regarding the underground world. Hermes's words and the bronze door deep in the City of Miracles corroborate with each other. The Dragon of Imagination Ankowilt had really tried to resolve the problem of the underground world, but ended up with fear and trauma. From the looks of it, the greatest possibility for the coming of the apocalypse is probably from the cosmos, and my current sequence doesn't qualify me to know of it.
Amidst his thoughts, Klein sighed as he continued flipping through the diary pages in his hand. After reading a few pages, his eyes suddenly lit up and locked onto one of the pages.
31st December. The end of a year is the most suitable time to make a resolution and start a new story. I've already thought of where the 8 secret mausoleums should be built. I'm just clueless about the last one. This has to be more covert than the 8 previous ones, or else it will be meaningless. After a long thought, I thought of a place. The nameless island where Grimm was buried. Of course, the abyss is also an option. However, I can't find a living devil in the area that I can enter, so I can't force them to become my citizens and help me build a mausoleum. Ordinary humans can't survive there, and even powerful beyonders will find it difficult to resist the corrosive properties of the abyss itself. Regardless, the environment on that nameless island seems like a pretty good choice. The princes of abolition in the fourth epoch's understanding of citizens is too limited. The rule of an emperor is not only limited to humans and humanoid creatures. All living things should be my subjects. And there are many extraordinary creatures on that nameless island with no intelligence. They have long worshipped and followed me. I can totally drive them into building a secret mausoleum. When I wrote this, I suddenly recalled that experience. Because I dreamed of Grimm, I brought Edwards, Benjamin, and the others back to this nameless island and discovered that those extraordinary creatures lived together in harmony. They were gathered together and holding a ritual, and amongst them was the deceased Grimm. I was indeed shocked back then. I felt a fear that I hadn't felt in a long time, and everything appeared extremely bizarre. That time, William and Polly died. Only Edwards and Benjamin survived. If I hadn't already become powerful and controlled a Grade 0 sealed artifact, everyone would have perished along with them. The power of those beyonder creatures that affected that nameless island actually came from the cosmos, and those who were corrupted would return to the source after dying. Thankfully, the power from the cosmos could only project a small portion of it into the real world,
I finally solved the problem and made that nameless island my secret base. Now, it's time to use it.
After reading the diary, Klein didn't feel exhilarated that he had correctly guessed where Emperor Rozel's final mausoleum was. Instead, he frowned slightly. This was, on the one hand, because the corruption caused by the cosmos had truly appeared in front of him. On the other hand, the nameless island wasn't that secretive. Other than the Emperor, there were also the two survivors, Edwards and Benjamin. It didn't meet Rozel's requirements of complete secrecy.
Before this, did Edwards and Benjamin pass away normally, resulting in them being unable to divulge any secrets? Or was it that, after Rozel successfully built the mausoleum, he made these two subordinates stay on the island forever, resolving the problem of spirit channeling? Of course, if Rozel had the corresponding sealed artifacts or Beyonder powers, he could also make them completely lose the corresponding memories.
After a moment of silence, Klein flipped through the diary pages again in search of the coordinates to the nameless island. However, he didn't see the corresponding content when he reached the last page. Instead, there was a diary entry that vaguely revealed some of Rozel's thoughts in his later years.
27th December. I've been feeling uneasy recently because I have no confidence in what will happen next. I no longer yearn for help. I'm very satisfied if they can remain neutral. I have put myself in the most dangerous situation. This is an act of me taking initiative, but it is also a choice due to a lack of options. Sometimes I'm very confused. How did I end up like this? Was I too extreme? Or was this the only thing I could do? No. At this point in time, I can't be confused anymore. Apart from affecting my mindset and making the already slim chances even slimmer, it's meaningless. Now that I've reached this point, I can only continue on. If I succeed, it will naturally be sunshine and rainbows. Heh, all my hopes are placed on one sentence. Life is possible by being in death's embrace.
From the looks of it, the Emperor really chose the method of making use of one's revival after death to escape the madness and corruption. This is simply crazy. It's like he's playing a game of Russian roulette with all 6 chambers filled, hoping that one of the rounds misfire. People who don't like going to the extremes, or those who are good at coming up with all kinds of strange ideas, wouldn't consider the viability of this method. Perhaps it's because the enemy can't guess it that this might give the Emperor a sliver of a chance of living.
Klein leaned back into his chair as he silently sat in the ancient palace for a while. After he slowly recovered his scattered thoughts, he considered how to find the nameless island.
I remember that the person who visited the nameless island, Benjamin, seems to be from the Abraham family. This be asked via Miss Magician. Yes, I'll be meeting her soon. There's no need to specially get the fool to pass the message. I'll get Queen Mystic to ask the descendants of Edwards, William, and Polly. That will be more suitable.
With this in mind, he surveyed the area and sighed before disappearing above the gray fog.